Okay, we are now recording on Zoom. Let me get the Facebook started. Okay. Let me here. Okay, I believe we are now live on Facebook. So Fabiano, if you could just let us know if it's live, and then once you say yes, Sam will get started.
Yes, it's live.
Great. So welcome everybody to the Somerville City Council Ward Candidates Forum on Housing. My name is Sam and I'm a community organizer at CAAS, the Community Action Agency of Somerville. We are so proud to host this series of candidates forums in partnership with the Somerville Renters Committee. Before we begin, I'd like to review some event logistics. The agenda for tonight's forum will include welcome and ground rules from the Renters Committee, opening statements from candidates, 4 open-ended housing questions, a lightning round of yes or no questions, and then our closing by 9 p.m. For this forum, our questions are already prepared for the candidates. However, if you have more questions at the end of the event, we encourage you to contact candidates directly. This event is being recorded and the Zoom room is closed to the public. However, we are currently live streaming the forum to the CAAS Facebook page. And later this week, we will send links to this recording and to the candidates' questionnaire responses via email to everyone who registered for our mayoral candidates forum from this past Sunday. And finally, for tonight's forum, we have simultaneous interpretation from English into Spanish for our members on the Renters Committee who speak Spanish. We are so grateful for the time and expertise of our interpreter, Mario, who is ensuring language access for this event. And we ask that candidates please speak slowly and clearly for our interpreter. Again, thank you all so much for being here. And now I would like to pass it to Akita from the Somerville Renters Committee.
Good evening to the candidates, neighbors of Somerville and outside the city, and members of CAAS, the Community Action Agency of Somerville. My name is Akita and I'm a resident of Ward 1 and a member of the Somerville Renters Committee. The Somerville Renters Committee was formed in response to COVID-19 pandemic, but we have been experiencing the affordable housing crisis firsthand and much longer. As an organized group of working class and low income renters from many different backgrounds, the Somerville Renters Committee is building a movement of families and neighbors to make Somerville a better city for all. Tonight for the forum, we really appreciate all of the councilmen for taking time to speak to residents of Somerville. This is a nonpartisan and non-endorsement event. We look forward to hearing the answers to your committee's questions on housing and how we can make sure that working class and low income residents can remain in the city we call home. As a reminder of our forum ground rules, we ask that you please speak slowly and clearly for the interpreters. Please keep the forum professional. No attacks between candidates, no interruption, no offensive language will be tolerated. Please stick to the time given for your answer during each part of the forum. And please stick to the topic of the question. Matt from our committee will be assisting with time and rule keeping. Again, thank you to everyone for being here tonight. I will now pass it to Nicole.
I'm
Hi,
passing it to
everyone.
Denise.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Denise. I'm a resident of Ward 4 and a member of the Somerville Renters Committee. I would like to thank all 11 out of 13 ward candidates who were present here today. Matt McLaughlin, who is running for re-election for Ward 1, is having his first child and couldn't be here tonight. The candidate for Ward 6, Lance Davis, opted out of this forum. He is also running for re-election. Both candidates are running without opposition. We will now begin the opening statements. Ward candidates have 1 minute and 30 seconds to share their opening statements on who they are and their vision on housing Somerville. We will begin in alphabetical order by ward and candidates' last names, and then rotate the order throughout the forum. Nicole will be calling the candidates' names.
Okay, Sam, is the blue sky timer ready?
Yes, it is.
Okay, first from Ward 2, we will have Steph Amman.
Good evening, everybody. And again, thank you so much for having this. It's a very important forum to have. Again, my name is Steph Amman, and I've been living and renting most of my life. You know, it's been difficult. My mom lost her home growing up. I lived in a foster home, and I spent a long time living in the Mystics. After living in the Mystics for quite some years, I got involved with tenants issues, and then I eventually became Mr. Tenant President myself. It was unfortunate, though. I thought when I moved out the community that I was all set and I made it. But then it opened up a whole new host of new market renter issues that I'm still going through right now. And we'll be having to move because finding the next good deal is what's most important to renters. It's unfortunate, but we definitely need to prioritize renters' lives in this community because we have a great opportunity to do a lot for people in this space. I really think that as renters in this community, we have to stand behind each other. And I really hope to be out there representing my renters. And hopefully my renters can come out there and help me represent them. We have to make a Somerville that works for everybody, and we have the opportunity of doing that. And I really think if we come together that we can make that happen. So really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we will have JT Scott from Ward 2 once the timer's ready.
I'm going to start it right now.
Hi, I'm JT Scott, current Ward 2 City Councilor seeking re-election this year. In the last 24 years, I've spent as much time as a tenant as I have as a homeowner. While I'm lucky enough now to own my home, I spent years as a tenant here in Somerville. I know firsthand the fear and instability that comes from not knowing if a sudden rent increase or condo conversion will force your family to move. I know firsthand the frustration that the maintenance of your living condition is reliant upon a landlord that holds the upper hand in a brutal power differential. And I personally had to start raising our first child in a house contaminated with lead paint because of the potential consequences of confronting my landlord about his legal requirement to de-let our apartment. Fair housing, safe housing, stable housing, including rent control, condo conversion ordinance, and other tenant protections have been a cornerstone of my advocacy and my work on the city council since being elected. I've worked with tenant unions, organized with City like Vita Urbana to prevent displacement. I'm proud of my record, but I know there's so much more that needs to be done. Just this week, I've been helping tenants who reached out due to terrible living conditions in their subsidized units, tenants who are being displaced due to outrageous 20% rent increases, and tenants who need help protecting themselves from predatory lease conditions. 80% of Ward 2's residents are renters and they need more help. That's why I'm excited to go back to City Hall and continue the work, building on the progress of the last 2 terms to deliver even more protection for tenants and to finally create locally owned public housing that can serve the specific needs of our community. Thank you.
Okay, from Ward 3, we have Ewan Kampen.
And here goes the timer.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ewan Kampen. I'm running for re-election as Ward 3 City Councilor. Housing affordability was the issue that first inspired me to get involved in local politics and to run for office in 2017. And since winning that first election, it has remained my absolute top priority in office. And together with my colleagues on the city council over the last 2 terms, we have passed what I believe are the most ambitious and bold set of housing policies of any city in the state. And I hope you will have the opportunity to get into some of those details. Just a couple of things that I'd like to uplift right up front. In the last term, I led the passage of our Affordable Housing Overlay District, which will make it easier to build affordable housing in every neighborhood of the city for decades to come. And in addition to that, I helped to co-found our first community land trust in Somerville, and I currently serve as one of the founding board members. But in this introduction, it's very easy for me to sit here as a city councilor and talk about everything we've done. I really want to say 2 things. First, people like me, city councilors, we often take credit for the work we've done, and it is hard work. But it is really thanks to the organizing of people like you that keep this issue as the top priority in Somerville. So I want to thank you for that. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge this is not a time to be sitting around and patting ourselves on the back. We need to be fighting to protect tenants in Somerville, to create new affordable housing, and to push for statewide change, things like rent control and tenant protections. Thank you.
Okay, in Ward 4, we have Jesse Klingen.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for putting this on. As somebody who grew up in Section 8 housing, I lived 7 different apartments by the time I was 12. I understand firsthand, and then watching all my friends ultimately get priced out of Somerville and displaced, I understand firsthand what it means to have stable housing and a roof over your head. My mother she actually worked for CAAS, but she was also a member. Back in those days, they had some strong tenant unions. She fought for rent control. So this is my background, as well as just watching friends and family members through my life, have to deal with being homeless, including, close family members. So also just growing up in the 80s and having the type of landlords that existed in Somerville at that time, that's why we were moving so much. It was either, we either got behind on the rent or, and I think what that speaks to is sort of not only my experience with housing, but sort of my vision for housing. And it speaks to also the organizing efforts that I've been trying to be part of. And I think that we need desperately in Somerville is tenant organizing. I think that is really the sort of the backbone. And we as councilors, we can do as much as we can within our powers. And we can always do more. And and like my good councilor from Ward 3 said, we've done quite a bit with a lot more to go. But ultimately, we can only do so much, and then it gets to the state level. So this is going to take all of our organizing to bring back rent control, to bring back the really strong protections that renters need.
Jesse, I'm sorry, we're out of time.
An affordable zone. That's fine.
Okay, thanks so much. So in Ward 5, first of 3 candidates, we have Tessa Bridge.
Hi everyone, my name is Tessa Bridge and I'm running for City Council in Ward 5 because I believe that Somerville can be an equitable, sustainable, and healthy community for all. There's so much that's wonderful about Somerville, and the city is not working for everyone. Many people can no longer afford to live here and are being displaced. Although we tout Somerville's diversity as one of our community's biggest assets, we are failing to invest in policies that support people without privilege to live here. And our budget does not reflect the values we profess to hold. I am running because I am not willing to accept this status quo. To become an equitable, sustainable, and healthy community, we must name the ways that power and privilege shape our policies and practices and engage with parts of our community that have not had a voice in decision-making. I have done this as a racial justice organizer in Cambridge Public Schools, fighting for the transfer fee and against the FRIT waiver with Our Revolution Somerville, and for a living wage for paraprofessionals with the Somerville Educators Union. I've consistently fought for justice, stood up to power, and organized to build grassroots power. I am running for City Council on a platform of boldly investing in affordable and social housing, housing stability services and tenant protections, building a worker-centered economy, and upgrading our housing stock to net zero. Housing is the #1 issue that I hear about on doors, and I take seriously the commitments that I am making to my neighbors, and I will fight for those commitments in office. I look forward to working with all of you so together we can build a Somerville that works for all of us.
Thanks, Tessa. Just a reminder to the candidates again to try to speak slowly so Mario can keep up with his interpretation. I know that means you might need to slow down your remarks a bit. So next from Ward 5, we have Todd Easton. Todd, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, guys. Thank you to CAAS and the Somerville Renters Committee for hosting this event tonight. Somerville has some big changes ahead, and I'm excited about the opportunities before us. My name is Todd Easton, and I'm a candidate for Ward 5 City Council. My wife Debbie and I moved here over 20 years ago, and we've raised our 3 kids here. I've watched the city grow and change over the years, and I've been involved from the very beginning through community service. I transformed my passion for athletics into volunteer work with our local youth sports. As an avid artist and arts enthusiast, I pursued opportunities to volunteer with our Somerville Arts Council. I've also been involved with the schools, working with my kids and the community there. With my involvement in those variety of community groups, I've had the unfortunate experience of having families leave due to affordability. It isn't something that has stopped over the years, and we need to address it in a way that we can try to sustain the community that we have here now. One of the things that I really want to work towards is what we can do for the arts and cultural community. They were the backbone that got Somerville to where it is today, and they need assistance also. Today, I hope to continue the service as the next Ward 5 Councillor. I look forward to tonight's forum.
Okay, and then our third candidate from Ward 5, Beatrice Gomez Moacad.
Hi, thank you. Mi nombre es Beatriz Gómez Moacad y soy una de sus candidatas para el recinto 5 del Consejo Municipal. I'm a Puerto Rican-born architect with experience in project management, construction, planning, and affordable housing, and a resident of the city for 18 years. I want to first thank CAAS for holding this forum and for all the great work you do in Somerville to help those most in need and achieve economic justice. I've seen your flyers as I knock door to door and your advocacy for renters. Y quiero agradecerles a CAAS sus esfuerzos por ser el primer foro político en la cual he participado que reconoce las diferencias lingüísticas de nuestra comunidad y provee traducción. I am running for City Council in part because of my experience in affordable housing and because I believe housing is a basic human right and the human infrastructure of our cities. Wages are not going up and housing costs are increasing. We need to fund and develop affordable housing to give all a decent place to live, regardless of legal status, race, accessibility needs, age, language, or language differences. Having worked in the development of affordable housing, starting as an architect, I worked on a 500-unit development in Boston, and later on, I worked in Cambridge for 5 years doing affordable housing. My moment of greatest pride was selling a house to the bus driver who drove me back and forth at work. And later on, his son worked with me in a project at Mass General Hospital after he got his biomedical degree. Jenny, an Asian immigrant I see every day at Star Market when I go, and we talked about our children, we share our successes. These are moments of great pride because I feel I'm contributing to the economy. I'm helping others, and it just means a lot to me. And this is something I want to keep on doing as a city councillor. I know
Okay,
how.
Beatrice, you're out of time for your opening statements. Thank you.
Okay.
So we're going to move on to Ward 7 candidates. So first we have Alex Anderson.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I just don't see the timer up yet. Great, thank you. Excellent. Hi, my name is Alex Anderson, and I'm seeking your vote for Somerville City Council's Ward 7 seat. I'm running for City Council because I believe local government is about ensuring everyone has access to and positive experiences with the right services to meet their needs so everyone can thrive in our community. Like the majority of our neighborhood, I'm a liberal progressive, committed to racial equity, social justice, affordability, and sustainability. And I believe I have the experience and capability to translate these progressive ideas into practical solutions for our neighborhood. As a first-time candidate for office, I'd like to share a little bit about me. I'm a husband and a dad, a systems thinker and healthcare researcher, a racial equity and street safety advocate, and your neighbor. My wife, Allison, and I moved to Simpson Avenue 8 years ago and have rented there and loved living there in Ward 7 ever since. Almost 3 years ago, Riley joined our family, and last September, our youngest son, Cameron, joined the fund in the middle of the pandemic. Allison and I moved to Ward 7 for access to public transit and a thriving local business and recreational community. We are choosing to raise our family here because we can walk to parks, playgrounds, and schools while enjoying all the arts, culture, and community engagement that our neighborhood provides. As the only parent in this race, I know what it means to be in a household of working parents, renting at home, and doing all that we can to make our neighborhood work better for our kids. And I think if we are going to make a neighborhood that works better for our kids, we need to aggressively take on the affordability crisis in our community, which for me means improving the existing housing stock and drastically increasing the supply of housing at low, middle, and working incomes across the entire community. I look forward to learning more about everybody and sharing some more thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, our next candidate from Ward 7 is Becca Miller, and reminder again to try to keep it a bit slow so Mario can keep up.
All right, I'll try, but no promises. Hey, my name is Becca Miller, and I'm running to be the next Ward 7 City Councilor. For the last 5 years, I've called Somerville home and built a community here. Like the majority of Ward 7 residents, I'm also a renter. I'm running for City Council because I want to change the status quo and build a community that works for all of us. Somerville has a progressive reputation, but we are in need of deep, transformative change if we want to build a community that truly reflects our values and ends our current displacement and affordability crisis. I work as an organizer to build food security with low-income families and the area farmers at my job, where I manage a campaign to increase state funding for a program that helps folks with SNAP get extra money to buy local produce directly from farmers. We've won $47 million from the state since 2017 and brought more people into the democratic process. Through my work, I've had to build consensus among the coalition around our shared values to pass policy year after year. We need to build up more organizers in Somerville so that Somerville is a truly organized and cohesive community. We need more tenants organizing for their rights against bad operators like my former landlord, LaCourte Realty. I'm running to pass a fair housing ordinance, fund tenants' right to counsel, extend the eviction moratorium, fund the community land trust, and build a movement for rent control at the state level, and probably more. Thank you so much, and I really look forward to the committee's questions.
Okay, and then our third Ward 7 candidate is Judy, Pineda, Neufeld.
Thanks, Nicole, and thank you so much to the CAAS team for organizing tonight's forum. My name is Judy Pineda Neufeld, and I'm running for City Council here in Ward 7. I'm a Mexican-American and Jewish woman and the proud daughter of 2 immigrant parents who raised me with the values of hard work and serving my community. I'm running for City Council because this moment demands bold leadership, and the neighborhoods of Ward 7 deserve a City Councilor with both the lived and professional experience to take action on our challenges from day one. Equity and justice aren't just boxes to check on a to-do list. It's a lens by which I live and lead, and I've been fighting for equity and justice my entire career. These last 17 months during the pandemic, I've been the leader of the Immigrant Services Unit under Somerville's COVID operations, working to bring critical resources to immigrant families, like access to food, rental assistance, and vaccines. As your Ward 7 City Councilor, I'll continue to amplify the voices of those most impacted. I'll fight for an equitable COVID-19 recovery plan that brings additional relief to small businesses and those still out of work. I'll fight for more affordable and accessible housing by passing a fair housing amendment, and will support the needs of the tenants of Clarendon Hill during its redevelopment. Fighting for equitable access isn't just a buzzword for me. It's the way I lead. I'm a small business owner, community organizer, a renter, and a public servant to the city of Somerville, and I'm looking forward to bringing this perspective to the City Council.
Okay, and our fourth candidate from Ward 7, Maria Kuchibaris, she was on the event originally, and it looks like she's since lost connection. Just want to acknowledge that if she comes back into the event, we'll plug her in. But for now, I'm going to pass it back to Denise.
Thank you to all candidates for your opening statement. And now I'll pass to Andrea to begin the housing questions.
Well, actually, Andrew is not here, so I'm gonna do the housing questions. No worries. Hi, everybody. My name is Magda Gomez, and I am a community organizer at CAAS. For this section, each candidate will have 1 minute and 45 seconds to answer open-ended housing questions developed by the Renters Committee. This reflects our experiences and hopes for housing in Somerville. Question number 1 is, the housing in Somerville that is available for low-income residents, including publicly owned, inclusionary, and other types of subsidized and privately owned, is often full of bad conditions, health, and safety code violations. How would you ensure that all renters are warranted safe and dignified housing in our city?
Okay, Sam, is the blue sky timer ready?
Yes, it is.
Great. So we're going to reverse our order, and first will be Judy in Ward 7.
Thank you. I'm so glad you asked this question. This is one of the main issues I heard about when I went door knocking in Clarendon Hill, was around maintenance and making sure that as we look to the redevelopment, that maintenance is top of the list for the developer, for the management company. We must ensure our public housing is adequately maintained. In fact, the next city councilor from Ward 7 has to be laser focused on supporting the needs of Clarendon Hill residents, like around maintenance, and to make sure the agreement that was negotiated is upheld, including the right to return. I also believe looking beyond public housing to figure out ways to incentivize landlords to make retrofits to our aging houses and buildings, so renters have access to safer housing options. It's also a climate issue, indoor air quality improves, etc. So that's one of the other issues I would look to do as a city councilor. Last, I think we should explore developing a rental registry, which I know there's been some conversation already at the city council level around this, so that landlords are held accountable around maintenance issues and around conditions, health, and safety code violations. So that's one of the third ways that I would make sure that we're laser focused on this and supporting our low-income residents across the city.
Great, thank you. And next from Ward 7, we will have Becca.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that I would prioritize this. I would work to fund and reform the Somerville Inspectional Services Department to ensure that we're enforcing all regulations that are currently on the books to really make sure that landlords who fail to uphold their end of the bargain provide up to code housing for tenants, and really make sure that we're enforcing those regulations. I'd also work to pass and fund tenants' right to counsel, as the current overwhelming majority of tenants, I think it's around 90%, don't have legal representation when facing eviction in court, whereas the majority, I think it's around 70% of landlords do, and we need to provide funding to make sure that that's a reality. I also support creating a registry of landlords that have failed inspections and been served code violations to better incentivize upkeep of units and make sure that renters really have all the information they need before signing a lease. As part of a Green New Deal for Somerville, I will push us to retrofit units to be healthier to live in and net zero for a greener future. I also support comprehensive services for folks who live in public housing and making sure that we're doing all we can to keep those units up to date. As we've seen with Clarendon Hill, that has unfortunately not always happened. And we really need to prioritize making sure that the families that live in Clarendon Hill can really make sure that we're staying in the community and their kids can stay at the West Somerville Neighborhood School when the redevelopment process starts this fall. Thanks.
Okay, and next in Ward 7, we will have Alex.
Thank you. So I agree with both what Becca and Judy said. I think the approach to ensuring that everybody in Somerville has a quality of life within their own home is a top priority. And for me, I think we have to take a proactive approach. There are a lot of programs at the state level, at the city level, that a lot of people don't know about and don't take full advantage of. And so I think at one capacity, we have to catalog all of those opportunities and then be proactive about how we go engaging with the community. If we wait for folks to speak up, there are too many structural barriers that are tied to historic racism, that are tied to historic classism, that limit the amount of engagement with existing services provided by the community. And so I think the city has a responsibility to document those opportunities and then be proactive, reaching out to members of the community, both from the landlord perspective and from the renter's perspective, to make sure that all services that are provided from the state and the city are fully utilized within all of our homes. I especially want to raise the idea of having a registry of effective landlords and ineffective landlords to increase accountability in the community. I think all too often we don't have the opportunity to share information about what we know goes on in the community, and it relies too much on hearsay or word of mouth, which again benefits those who have strong networks in the community and at the expense of those who do not. So we need to have a systematic approach to ensuring that people have the access to the right information when and where they need it, and then put the work in, put the investment in. And I'm in favor of finding new sources of revenue to fund these efforts, specifically around increasing parking meters and other traffic and parking fees, because we know that the impact on health, congestion, and quality of life as it relates to traffic is massive. Thank you.
Okay, next in Ward 5, we will have Beatrice.
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is have a 311, 211 system where tenants could call in anonymously to do reporting and look at dedicating a building inspector. I think the problem is so huge. We should have a dedicated building inspector for this. And then I would go into having large projects, absentee landlord projects, provide every 5 years a report on the condition of their building. This is similar. Condo associations do this. Hospitals have to do this to get licensed. And this would be done by a third party, a licensed engineer or architect. Another thing I would do is to help educate our tenants, because sometimes they don't know, is to have an informational video showing them common violations for them to be able to report. This would also help landlords, because I think sometimes the code is so complex, people don't understand what's out there. I would also incentivize providing a zero-cost loan for landlords who actually comply and do the repairs, and make them aware of all the different programs. Like Mass Save now has, very low cost insulation, for example. And I think you need to train landlords on code compliance. The code is very complex, especially for existing buildings. Article 34, which is a building code, is very complex. We also need to train our city staff on this. So I think, so that's in a nutshell. I'm under time, sorry.
Okay, next in Ward 5, we will have Todd. Oh, Todd, you're on mute.
Sorry, guys, I did it again. What the city needs to do is beef up its inspection and accountability program within ISD. That being said, informing the public of what's available to them is very, very important. What I found from my experiences interacting in the community is that lots of people don't know what's available to the city. Through communication and conversation, I'd be able to inform them what's available to us. That being said, we need to make sure that the city is doing right by the services that they offer. I agree with many of the ideas that come up, a rental registry and a dedicated person within ISD that can look at the rental situation that people have in the city.
Okay, and finally in Ward 5, we have Tessa.
Yeah, this is one of the most important issues facing our city, and something I hear about all the time as I'm talking to my neighbors and knocking doors. And I think, this is a situation that we need to use a lot of the tools we have at our disposal to address. So first of all, our housing stock in Somerville is aging, and we really need to invest dollars as a city in retrofitting our housing, both in big projects and in smaller units of 1, 2, 3 family homes, to bring it up to net zero as part of a Green New Deal, and to make sure that living conditions are adequate for folks who are living there. So the city, I think, can subsidize landlords to do that. And that can be triggered both by a landlord reaching out to the city and through inspections, flagging properties that are not cared for, and by renters reaching out. So that's one piece, is just writ large, investing in upgrading our housing stock. We really do need to spend attention as a city and resources in reforming ISD, making sure that that department is fully funded and fully staffed, and that the expectation of ISD is to do regular inspections and random inspections, so that landlords are really held accountable to doing the maintenance that is reasonable to expect of them. I also agree with the point some folks have made about the registry of landlords, so we can hold folks accountable in that way. And I think we really need to do trainings and deep community engagement to make sure that tenants are organized, are connected to the resources we have in our community, and know their rights. And one way we can do that is by sharing information about rights when leases are signed, as opposed to waiting until there's a notice to quit. And finally, a tenant's right to counsel, so that there are lawyers that are available, publicly funded through the city, to support tenants when issues arise, is incredibly important.
Okay, in Ward 4, we have Jesse.
Thank you. So one of the things that I think would help with, especially with regards to public housing, is transparency. Someone had mentioned a 311 service. I think that if that 311 service was in place and then available to everybody, I think just putting some lights on in terms of when a request comes in to fix something, and how that request gets processed, I think would really go a long way to ensuring people's faith in the system. That is, as well as again, it speaks to my opening statements around tenant organizing. I think this is really a big piece of it. But most importantly, when it comes to rental units in general, I think what we have is like sort of a don't ask, don't tell policy around, like, when you have a benevolent landlord or even just a landlord, you don't want the landlord to go up on the rent. So you tend to, people tend to stay quiet on issues. At least that's the way the people that I know do. And so I think in those situations, we have to have some sort of recourse for those folks so that they could, you don't want a contentious relationship with a landlord. If it happens, it happens. But I mean, ultimately, I think we need some sort of, like through the Office of Housing Stability, maybe we employ somebody else who would specifically focus on that, working with ISD to follow up on those things anonymously, if possible. I've helped many residents in this way anonymously. But the last thing I'll say is that I think that we need. I have already, with regards to the 100 homes program, I've actually put in place some board orders around 100 homes, and sort of like even someone as great as SCC not being able to maintain their stock. That's important.
Okay, in Ward 3, we have Ben.
I've heard a lot of really excellent ideas from all my fellow candidates. I'm not going to repeat all of them. I just want to focus on two issues. So, understandably, renters are incredibly fearful often about complaining about really unsafe conditions. And I'm sure all of us have heard some really nightmare scenarios. They're afraid of retribution from a landlord, which is completely understandable. And so that is why I think it's so important. And my colleague, Councillor Willem Baugh, has introduced an ordinance to establish a rental registry that I know several other candidates have mentioned. So this is currently before legislative matters. The administration fully supports this, and I would like to get this passed this fall. This would establish a database not only to register landlords about conditions and safety, but it would actually also include things around projected utility costs and energy efficiency. So seeing that done is a top priority. And, in some ways, it's kind of similar to how we have actually been addressing the rat problem. This is something that previously the city's rat baiting program was only available to landlords. So you have a situation where tenants are afraid to report really serious rat problems. And so thanks to advocacy from myself and others, we've now expanded that directly to tenants, and we've seen an enormous expansion of that program. And second, and this is something that's quite hard to achieve politically, is that we need to spend serious money on upkeep and maintenance, especially in projects that the city is involved in. You see this with large infrastructure projects across the country. It's great to go to a ribbon cutting, a groundbreaking. It's much harder politically to spend serious money on the upkeep on programs like 100 Homes. But that is exactly what we need to do. And I'm so glad that so many of us are willing to make that commitment, because politically it can be hard to do it, but it's absolutely essential.
Okay, in Ward 2, we have JT.
All right, I'm also really glad to hear so much support for the rental registry work that's going on right now. I want to point out that in order to do an annual inspection, being targeted for retaliation is very clear. If ISD shows up at your house, it's because one of your tenants called. I can help, as one of my colleagues also said, in trying to get some anonymous attention on these things. But ultimately, people are very vulnerable to retaliation. The only way to take that vulnerability out entirely is to make those inspections mandatory for everybody. But to get there, to implement annual inspections for every unit in the city, it's going to take 15 more inspectors in ISD and 2 clerks to manage a program like that. That's the read based on working with the director on it. I'm willing to make that investment. We also need to drastically reform the transparency and oversight of Somerville Housing Authority. I completely agree with my colleague from Ward 4 on that. We've got very limited oversight in the facility maintenance and spending. We also need to increase our capacity to require compliance from groups like SCC. I get complaints from residents in SCC buildings about the unsatisfactory conditions there. It's terrible. I'm glad to say I'm already working with city staff on a pilot project for this inspection schedule, one that may actually include an update of our Airbnb ordinance. It is going to provide us the legal basis to require that registry and the inspections and a smaller number of units to iron out all the details before hopefully rolling out a plan to cover the over 20,000 units in Somerville. Ultimately, though, we also need to work with the Community Land Trust and invest in building our own public housing with Somerville residents maintained by Somerville residents.
Okay, and from Ward 2 as well, we have Steph.
Yep, I'm just waiting for the timing to start. I do appreciate and applaud everybody for having answers to this question. It's extremely important that we address the largest population in Somerville. 66% of the city is renters. And being the president of a 1,400 populated resident community, I've heard all the stories, and it's definitely unfortunate some of the situations some families have gotten themselves into. Obviously, with some very shady landlords, we also need to understand that these houses are their business, and so we should be putting them on a data file for the Better Business Bureau. I think penalize, penalize, penalize. I think if they are bad landlords, they shouldn't be owning that business. I'm sorry, but if there's a restaurant that's giving out bad food, that restaurant gets shut down by the health by a health inspector. I believe that we should do better by funding our housing team, our housing community best by making sure that we are prioritizing developers who are putting out the best units for renters. It's definitely unfortunate that some of these developers are going to take an opportunity of meeting this inclusionary rate by just giving out the less desirable units in their apartment buildings. I think that we definitely should make sure that our tenants are getting the best spaces available. And it's only right that we do so.
Okay, thank you. So before we move on to question number 2, a reminder again, candidates, to please slow down your speaking. We do want to make sure for the non-first language of English speakers in our committee that they can follow what's being said. So for this question number 2, will be asked by our committee member Yolanda, who speaks Spanish. And so Mario will be interpreting her words for non-English speakers. Yolanda, por favor.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Yolanda Montiel. Soy residente del distrito número 1 y miembro del comité de inquilinos de Somerville. La pregunta es, ¿los residentes de bajo ingreso a menudo se enfrentan a propietarios y administradores de propiedades que pueden ser agresivos y no respondan a ellos? Algunos inquilinos que son personas de color o inmigrantes han experimentado racismo y otras formas de discriminación. Esto significa que incluso los residentes pueden permitirse dejar de vivir en Somerville. No se sientan bienvenidos ni acogidos acá. ¿Qué haría para asegurarse de que todos los residentes sientan que pertenezcan a nuestra ciudad y que estén autorizados para defender sus derechos como inquilinos y estén protegidos contra represalias? Si se postula para la reelección, comparta lo que ya ha hecho sobre este tema y lo que pretende priorizar a continuación.
Okay, gracias, Yolanda y Mario. So first, we will have Ben in Ward 3.
Okay, I'm going to take you up on the talking slowly, and I'm going to focus on one really specific thing that I've tried to do in office around fair housing. So I think broadly on the issue of making sure that people from all backgrounds feel welcome in Somerville, we need to be crystal clear about our values at all times. And that means publicly, declaring that this is an anti-racist city. This is a city where everyone is welcome, and we're never going to back away from those values. Specifically on housing discrimination, the way that housing discrimination is currently enforced is that when there is a complaint, you can reach out to the Fair Housing Commission, who will then send undercover testers to determine whether they can verify an unfair, a violation of fair housing policy. This is we all know, completely insufficient. And we all know that there is rampant abuse of this against people of color, against low-income tenants, against people with babies. What I have been advocating since the day I got into office is that we should have a really beefed up program where we are proactively sending out testers to document this before we get a complaint, to put landlords and real estate agents on notice that this is something that will not be tolerated in Somerville, is a violation of federal law, and is something that is going to be taken seriously in this community.
Okay, thank you. And next from Ward 4, we will have Jesse.
Thank you. I'm glad to follow Councillor Ewan Kampen. I've been in those discussions, and I absolutely support those efforts to make sure that we are doing more spot checks more often, because we really, otherwise there's no fear in these landlords as far as sort of the way they treat people and the way they who they choose to because I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we have a lack of diversity. As far as public housing, or even just housing in general, anytime I talk to tenants.
Jesse, sorry to interrupt. Your connection slowed for about 10 seconds. So we just wanted to give you a heads up. Yep, if you wanted to repeat that, we'll restart the timer for you.
Okay. Yeah, so I just said, I think that the way property owners treat minority renters, immigrant renters, I think is one of the reasons why we lack diversity in Somerville at this point. And as far as like dealing with property owners and in public, whether it be public housing or in general and renters, I advise to record and as far as when they come to instances where people have been blamed for things they didn't do, and so I encourage people to document everything, people to record interactions they have with how. Definitely say that we need.
Okay, next in Ward 5, we have Todd.
There are a variety of city departments and commissions that are already quarterly tasked with addressing issues of racism, discrimination, and inequity. I would work to ensure that they are properly funded and adequately staffed so we can investigate the issues that arise. I'd also get the Director of Racial and Social Justice involved with her staff to work together to make sure that things that do arise are addressed. And to follow up again, I think there should be a landlord registry on that people should be able to identify and go forward with in the future to know that they should be able to operate in the city.
Okay, thank you. And next in Ward 5, we have Tessa.
Thank you. I echo a lot of what we've already heard here tonight. I'll pick up on a couple threads. So I think one way that we can address this issue is to work very closely with the Office of Housing Stability and the Fair Housing Commission and make sure that we're creating and funding programs that protect tenants against landlords who are not doing what they need to do and in fact breaking the law. And one of the key ways that we can do this is by having a tenant's right to counsel so that tenants get access to a lawyer through the city when they are facing issues with their landlord. And this will directly address some of the fears of retaliation that we're hearing about here tonight that are very legitimate. If a tenant knows that they have legal backing when they come at their landlord saying you are discriminating against me, they're much more likely to win their case, and they're also much more likely to be protected in their housing. So tenants' right to counsel is incredibly important. We also need to make sure that the Fair Housing Commission is representative of the community and that it includes residents who are living in affordable housing and immigrants, and that the Fair Housing Commission is both responsive to complaints, but also proactive in enforcing the law. And this is another place where supporting tenants to organize, supporting tenants with the tools to organize is incredibly important, because collective organizing is one of the best ways to push back against predatory landlords. And again, throughout all of these pieces, community engagement is absolutely crucial. We need to make sure we're running Know Your Rights trainings, that we're giving tenants information about what their rights are when leases are signed in multiple languages, so that everyone has access to the information they need to advocate for themselves.
Okay, and also from Ward 5, we have Beatrice.
Can I do it in Spanish, the answer? Is that impolite? I just want to be recognized that one of our renters speaks Spanish and speak back to her in Spanish, if that's allowed. Or is that
Mario, will you
confusing?
be able to interpret?
Okay. Y discúlpeme que Yolanda, quiero contestar su contestación en su pregunta en español para reconocer que tenemos una comunidad de habla hispana. Mi sugerencia sería que realmente yo creo que el problema más grande que tenemos es que nuestros inmigrantes están en vivienda que no es adecuada. Y es hora de que empecemos a construir vivienda para nuestros inmigrantes. Porque yo he oído muchas veces que no pueden, vemos a nuestros inmigrantes viviendo en unas condiciones que están bien apiñadas, están todos y no pueden comprar las propiedades a través del Home Program porque no están bajo los códigos legales de la propiedad. Y creo que es hora de que cambiemos eso. También es hora de que pasemos un proceso, como ya bien dije, en que se crea una inspección regular de las propiedades. Así no hay el riesgo de reportar, que las propiedades tienen que reportar cada año, cada 5 años, reportan sus condiciones bajo lo que llamamos un third party, un arquitecto o un ingeniero licenciado. Además de eso, es importante que se le dé consejo legal a aquellas personas que quieren reportar. Pero yo creo que realmente lo que estamos viendo aquí es que tenemos un problema con la vivienda para los inmigrantes. I just want to say very quickly one thing I just said. I think one of the issues I'm hearing is poor conditions for our immigrant populations. And I think we need to advocate for building housing for immigrant populations. Other countries do this. I know it's out of the box for the United States, but I think we need to start thinking about that. Thank you.
Just want to double check really quick. Mario, during that Beatrice just now, were you interpreting to English or no?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gotcha. Okay, Beatrice, we'll just have to be mindful of that for responses going forward.
No, I just want to be mindful and recognize that there are communities made of other people of other languages. Sorry, it's very important to me. I don't want to exclude others, but this is what it feels like when you're speaking. Just so you know. Sorry. Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, we're grateful for Mario's participation this evening and the 3 interpreters we had with us on Sunday night. So now in Ward 2, we have Steph.
Yes, definitely. I applaud everybody. It seems like a lot of people have an understanding about this space and the unfortunate situations that a lot of our renters are going through. I myself had to go through a lot of those situations, and I'll be signing my 3rd lease in 2 years real soon. So we definitely know that there's an issue going on. The Office of Housing Stability definitely needs to get funded more to address this large population that we have in the city. But also too, we definitely need to look at the landlords, see if we can set up a system where we can, reward the best landlord in the city, because oftentimes we shake our fingers at the ones that are doing wrong, but we also have to applaud the ones that are doing right. But then I also do agree with Beatrice on the building of immigrant housing. Just like we we would like to, and we're starting to reach out to the colleges to build micro spaces for the students who are taking these master's programs. Bless their hearts, they are over here to go to some of the best schools in the world. Then they can afford the rent, but the problem is that they're renting away from families. And so building a space to accommodate them, I think would be great. And building a space to accommodate our immigrants who are going through these issues of having these very off apartments would be nice as well. That way we can address both those populations and then open up a lot of units for families. But we definitely have to hold our landlords up to our landlords that are doing it. We definitely have to hold them up and praise them. So we'd like to see that happen. Thank you.
Okay, and next from Ward 2, we have JT.
All right, thanks. First off, everybody's dead on with regard to the outright discrimination. Bottom line is we need more resources in office housing stability, fair housing commission, and a right to counsel that the city funds. I'm helping tenant right now with a terrible, terrible lease situation. And I'm glad that we have the office of housing stability there to help, but what they can't give them is a lawyer to help them get all the way through the process. I've fought for this funding. I'll continue to fight for it every budget season, but I want to bring up a larger problem, which is something that I hear a lot about and I see around this question of belonging and being welcomed. It requires us to address the other effects of gentrification and construction disruption and cultural displacement, right? You know, the cultural displacement effects and the fact that this construction just makes it miserable to live in the neighborhood means that we need a more serious approach than just build more housing, right? You can't, it's a segmented market. You can't solve a shortage of Toyota Corollas by building 1 million Lamborghinis. And cultural displacement is real. I mean, fundamentally, people look around and say, this isn't my neighborhood anymore. Why would I want to live here? The idea that the city's not a welcoming place for you, that you aren't cared and supported is a cascading consequence of development. It's a visceral experience of gentrification. And development without displacement really means preserving a sense that the people who live here now still belong here in the future. And that's why I'm proud of the over 150 meetings I've hosted in Ward 2 to shape development that includes tangible benefits to the people that already live here. I also want to say we should be supporting local owned small businesses in residential districts because those are the places where neighbors come together. It gives us moments to celebrate our communities and create an interconnected neighborhood.
Okay, in Ward 7, we have Becca.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to repeat what other folks have already said because I agree with a lot of it. And I also just wanted to add that, you know, I think we need to have really deep conversations and address some of the perception in our community that tenants are transient and not like, quote, real members of our community, which unfortunately I've heard a lot canvassing this past summer. So yeah, I agree with fighting for better funding for the Office of Housing Stability, the Fair Housing Commission to expand that and to work with community groups like CAAS has been doing on a Know Your Rights campaign. As City Councilor, I see that really as part of the job to hold those with CAAS and with partnership of the tenants unions in Ward 7. So that would be one way to address it. And I would also like to push the city to inform all residents of their landlord's responsibilities and of the means to hold them accountable when tenants are signing the lease. So in September, not when like, you know, you're running into a legal problem. Again, support the tenants' legal right to counsel and supporting tenants' right to form a union. So that means both the Tenants Association at Clarendon Hill, the LaCourte Tenants Union in Ward 7, and engaging the community in deep conversations and fighting for policies that ensure the human right to a home is available to all of us.
Okay, next in Ward 7, we have Judy.
Nicole. So discrimination of any form is unacceptable. And when we talk about valuing inclusion in Somerville, it means that all residents feel like they belong and their voices are heard. This is especially true for our immigrant community and our communities of color. I first want to acknowledge the real fear that still exists within our undocumented communities. The last 4 years under our last president's administration and the public charge has instilled real fear for folks to come forward with challenges around housing. So if we create a program where we might send folks in to do random inspections, that might create less trust and more fear, which isn't what we want. So I want to be careful around looking at this through an equity lens. Second, I think it's essential that residents are aware of their rights under the Fair Housing Law and that landlords are aware of their responsibilities. Through my work with the Immigrant Services Unit, we've partnered with CAAS. We've tabled side by side at grocery stores, handing out flyers alongside them. We made sure these flyers were included in bags that went home with students in the SPELL program this summer. So I want to make sure our partners like CAAS, our partners like the Welcome Project, obviously our Office of Housing Stability, have the resources they need to do this level of outreach, this community organizing, these one-on-one conversations with folks so that they know their rights. Third, I think we should be thinking about how we create inclusive communities and what that really means. I'm really passionate about language access. I'm really glad we have an interpretation tonight. And so I want to pass a language access ordinance to make sure our city is more welcoming and accessible to everyone. We worked with a resident who struggled with the environment and lack of inclusion at Assembly in terms of their affordable housing. Access, that's a piece of it.
Judy, I don't know if this is the case for everyone. The last like 7 seconds just froze. So do you want to just repeat your final statement there?
Yeah, sorry, my internet said unstable. Hopefully we are stable again. I was just sharing a quick anecdote. There was a resident we were working with who lives in affordable housing at Assembly Square who felt like it wasn't a very welcoming and inclusive environment because all of the information they were getting was not in their language. So making sure that we're working with management companies and creating real inclusive communities across the city, including in affordable housing.
Great, thank you. And last for this question from Ward 7, we have Alex.
Thank you. So as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm a systems thinker. And for me, what that means is really understanding the institutional issues that have taken place throughout our history and how they register today, the interpersonal exchanges between landlords and tenants, landlords in the city, tenants and the city, the individual experiences, our beliefs and attitudes, and what our at-large culture is. And so it's been really great to hear all of the candidates' reflections on each level of those elements of a system on how we address discrimination in housing and how we can get to real equity and fairness when we're thinking about what we're trying to achieve, which is a community that works for everybody, where everybody feels welcome and can thrive. So I really like the ideas that we've shared. I especially lean into all of the ideas that talk about creating registries of things when they go wrong, especially when there's instances of racism, classism, sexism, or any other form of oppression, xenophobia, things that make people feel excluded. I think we need to be proactive about providing services to people. The city should really invest in services that provide standard documents in all languages spoken in our community. For example, a standard lease that can be used and encouraged by the city that all landlords use, regardless of the style of housing. So everybody has a starting place that is the same in terms of what rights they have access to. And then we need to fund the resources to enforce those types of rules, to fund legal counsel for people who need to pursue action against their landlords. And finally, in terms of one piece of the questions of what can we do to ensure that all residents feel welcome, I think the city can do a much better job of creating cultural opportunities for pockets of our community to celebrate their heritage, to celebrate their culture, to celebrate their life. We have a lot of the arts at large, but it would be great to see all of our communities have the opportunity to have the weekend festivals and the weekend celebrations. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, candidates. I will pass it to Marla. Marla, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Marla, and I'm on Ward 4 resident. I'm a member also of the Somerville Renters Committee, and this is question number 3. As a city councilor, how would you collaborate with your colleagues on council and the new mayoral administration to protect Somerville renters from displacement due to development? And how would you ensure that the new developments give the allocated number of units to low-income residents, as the oversight seems to be currently lacking?
Thanks, Marla. So our first candidate in Ward 5 will be Beatrice.
One of the important things, I'm going to answer the first part of the question. I might have to have you repeat the second, but this is talking about enforcement. we should need, before you apply for a building permit, the developer should have what is called a certificate of consistency. That is, they're complying with any zoning, any inclusionary units that they're provided. They should not be allowed to occupy the building, have any mortgages, or have any legal transactions once they are closing out on the building. No occupancy. I think those are checkpoints that other cities have, and I think we should be implementing these if they don't exist already in our city. I am shocked that we have developers not doing what they're supposed to do. Can you please repeat quickly the first part of the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the first part of the question is, as a city councillor, how would you collaborate with your colleagues on council and the new mayoral administration to protect Somerville renters from displacement due to development?
So this is a very challenging question, because one of the biggest issues of development is rising prices. And we need to, one of the things I want to start exploring is the conversion of our 2 and 3 families into condos. I think my theory is that it's potentially inflating housing costs. So you have a unit that was selling just a few years ago for like 800, 600, which is, I know it's still outrageous, but a family could somehow afford it and rent it. All of a sudden, a developer takes that. I'll give an example, a property around the corner, it sold for 1 million, and now the property is worth close to 3 million, now that it's converted into 3 condos. We have tripled the price of that property in no time. So I think we need to be very careful about these conversions and densifications.
Okay, next in Ward 5, we have Tessa.
So first, the collaboration piece. You know, I said at the top of my opening statement that housing is the number one thing that I hear on doors. It's the number one thing that I, have experienced myself when I was a renter in the city, and have, known people who are very close to me who have struggled finding housing, and who have many people who have been pushed out of the city. This is a story that we all hear and talk about all the time. And I'm running on a very bold, progressive platform around investing in housing, investing in workers, and investing in tenant rights. And that is something that I take incredibly seriously. And I'm going to bring that accountability around that to City Council. I'm going to feel accountable to the people who elected me, and I'm going to continue to organize with residents in Somerville to hold the City Council and the Mayor's office accountable to that. It takes political courage to hold the line, especially when there is pushback and money on the table from developers. We have not seen a willingness on the part of our city to hold that line. And I think we need City Council to be a real backstop to make sure that the things that we're all talking about here actually come to pass. And in terms of the second part around new developments and allocated units, it's the same accountability piece. So it's, what are we willing to do on the council and in the mayor's office to say no to developers when they try to wiggle out of the rules that we have? How are we going to make sure that we really are building with prevailing wage, even if it's a little more expensive, that we really are building to net zero, even if it's a little more expensive, because those are our values as a community. And I think we need to do that with the community, with organizations like CAAS, and really keep the pressure up so that it becomes unacceptable to not follow these rules. So I think all of us working together are what we're going to need to do to hold developers' feet to the fire and hold them accountable.
Okay, and also from Ward 5, we have Todd.
So from my personal life experiences here in the city, what I found that when you engage your neighbors and the families at your kids' schools or at the cultural events in the city, a lot of people have the same ideas as far as addressing issues in the city. Lots of people feel like they're the only ones out there that are dealing with those situations. That being said, I like to tell people you need to keep communicating and telling your story to people so it gets out there, and you won't be the only one. You'd be surprised how many people are dealing with the same situation in other parts of the city. That being said, when there's consensus to the issue at hand, I would bring that to the council, the larger council, and identify the problems that are going there and try to get them on board to push the agenda forward to fix the situations that the people have. holding the city accountable. A way that we can get them involved in the development is to do more private-public partnerships with residential development. When we tend to let the developers go on their own, as we've seen in the past, they've somehow negotiated their way out of the deals that we've made with them. So I think it would be good for the city to somehow to figure out private-public partnerships to ensure that we get the things that we ask for.
Okay, next in Ward 7, we have Judy.
Great, thanks. So first, I'm in support of passing a fair housing amendment, and this will require community impact assessments which account for past histories of discrimination. So as city councilor, I'll make sure that these assessments are adequately examining the factors that have led to gentrification, displacement, and discrimination in our city. Second, I also want to make sure tenants are at the table during community meetings on development. I went a few months ago to a community meeting about a development happening here in Ward 7 in Teal Square above the True Bistro building, where there's 5 tenants who live in the apartments there who would likely be displaced during that development process as the developer works to make giant units, 5 giant units above True Bistro, and none of the 5 tenants who occupy any of the apartments there were at that meeting, nor did they know about it. And so making sure that folks are at the table, placing political pressure on developers to make sure we're bringing voices in as we talk about development is incredibly important. Last, in my own personal experience as a leadership development consultant, I've actually worked on bringing a wide range of voices to the table for input on issues that affect them. And I'll plan to do the same if elected. So this includes actually working on housing policy. For the City of Boston's Health and Human Services Department a few years ago, I worked on a collective impact process specifically focused on housing stability, which brought all the different stakeholders together and figured out how each of the sub-departments under HHS could work together to make a difference on housing stability. And we've seen real change in Boston around that. So I'm proud of that work I've done, and I'll bring that perspective to Somerville as well.
Okay, and also in Ward 7, we have Alex.
Great, thank you. To the first part of the question of how we collaborate with colleagues on the council and the new mayoral administration to protect Somerville renters from displacement due to development, I think the first piece of us is actually to get together and be explicit about what we share in terms of our interests, in terms of our values, and in terms of what we're getting to the table, what we're bringing to the table. I think in my experience of attending public meetings in the past, where councilors have been present, where members of the city have been present, where the public has been present, is that all too often we start with solutions and then the discussion begins there, instead of starting with what we care about as a community, what we're trying to achieve together. So actually, like Judy, I also have the experience in my professional work of working with complex stakeholders, trying to work together towards shared goals, even if they have different perspectives on how to get there. And so bringing that experience to how we can actually work on in terms of the human impact of all of our decisions, on how complex systems can, and the stakeholders within them can come together for shared solutions, is what I do in my professional work as well. And so bringing that perspective to the city council would be something that I would do in my daily work. To the second part of the question, in terms of how would we ensure that new developments give the allocated number of units to low-income residents, as the oversight seems to be currently lacking. For me, this starts with a place of let's get improved contracts and improved clauses in those contracts that the city has to engage in. Let's come together as a community and increase the types of requirements that we have when licensing new issues for building and permits and those sorts of things, to ensure that there are clauses that provide accountability and even possibly actual financial payments from developers to go into city funds. And on that last point, to ensure this type of work, I believe the city should create a fund that provides zero interest loans to developers who commit to heightened numbers of affordable units in their developments.
Okay, and also from Ward 7, we have Becca.
Yeah, so I'm going to try not to repeat what other folks have said, but I think that accountability piece is really important, both for candidates who are currently running. Once they get elected, we need to hold each other accountable to these campaign trail promises that we're making, as well as with the mayoral administration to hold them accountable to what they've been talking about this past year. I think that also works hand in hand with accountability from developers to make sure that they're really creating what the community actually wants, not just what the dollar demands. So as an organizer, I would work to build up community benefits agreements and, explore if we can legally pass a citywide community benefits agreement ordinance, or working to build up neighborhood councils so that there's stronger representation of tenants or folks that actually live in the community at those tables that can actually negotiate those agreements, as we've seen in Union Square. And really, I believe the role of a city councilor is to organize members of the community and work with folks to demand all that we can. Somerville is an incredibly attractive place to build right now, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So I think really what we need to do is demand more of the developers that are currently building here so that we can, get those allocated number of units to low-income residents, increase the number of units overall, and make sure that those are accessible. Thanks.
Okay, in Ward 2, we have JT.
All right, so we've heard a lot of good solutions. It's a big problem. It's going to require multiple departments, obviously working with economic development and with the neighbors to fight cultural displacement, like I talked about before. We need more beef in ISD and planning and engineering to perform inspections on new construction and just enforcing the conditions that we fought for so hard in all of these neighborhood meetings. It also means expanding the housing department. They're the ones who actually monitor and manage the affordable housing stock we currently have through inclusionary zoning. We literally lost the only affordable 3-bedroom unit in Somerville, lost it because even though it was deed restricted affordable forever, it got sold and then resold, and then the lawyers just couldn't get it back. So we definitely need better oversight. It's a real problem that exists, but ultimately we need rent control. We need rent control. There is no amount of supply that Somerville can add to fix our regional housing problem. The regional demand is 400,000 units. We have 34,000 units here. We could build 2 more Somervilles on top of Somerville and still not crack 20% of the regional demand. We can and we will build more, but in the meantime, as we try to build public housing, build regional housing, build public transit, we need to be building locally owned public housing to address the most critical needs here now. And we need to urgently create a pathway to rent control, rent stabilization to prevent the displacements while we work long-term on equalizing supply and demand. So we need to do both and urgently. Thank you.
Okay, and also from Ward 2, we have Steph.
Yes, thank you so much. I didn't get the opportunity of getting the question, but from the responses that I've heard, and I think that we are heading in a direction of trying to make sure that we take care of our residents better because of this overwhelming rising of rents. I think we need to take a long, hard look at ourselves as a city and see that what we're doing to our renters is just wrong. I think of definitely building up ISU. And making sure that we have our immigrants and our renters taken care of is extremely important in our city. What I feel could definitely happen.
Steph,
yes.
Sorry to cut you off because I know you lost your internet connection. Why don't we have Marla just repeat the question for you and to make sure that you're responding to the one all the candidates are. So Marla, if you're feeling ready, could you repeat the question? Maybe not. Okay, I'll go ahead and read the question aloud. So
thank you.
As a city councilor, how would you collaborate with your colleagues on council and the new mayoral administration to protect Somerville renters from displacement due to development? And how would you ensure that new developments give the allocated number of units to low-income residents, as the oversight seems to be currently lacking? And we'll go ahead and restart the timer for you.
All right, and thank you so much. Team effort. Oh, okay. Well, definitely sitting down and building that dialogue with my teammates. I think it's very important that, the city council really engage on what we have available in the city to build on. Obviously, our city is not going to get any bigger, so we should be looking at getting taller and the areas to put those. I think the Office of Housing Stability needs some more money to definitely build a new jobs so we can get inspectors in that department to go out and make sure that not only are those units being filled, that they are being filled with good units. Thank you.
Thank you. And in Ward 3, we have Ben.
Thank you very much. I'll wait for the timer. So what I like about this question is that it focuses on collaboration and how to make progress in a context where you have 11 city councilors and a mayor, all of who want our views to be heard and want our views to win the day. So how do we actually get things done in a context like that? So I'll start with an example, which is the Affordable Housing Overlay District that I talked about earlier. So this is a policy I think a lot of us in local politics were worried could be controversial. And the reason we thought that is because our neighbors in Cambridge actually fought over a policy like this for years, for multiple years before finally passing it. In Somerville, in contrast, we were able to introduce and pass this ordinance within a matter of months and to do so unanimously. Part of the answer for how we were able to do that is I was the chair of land use and I made sure that this was the only thing that we worked on for those months and to make sure that we lead the conversation on the big issues and what we are doing to solve them rather than focusing on kind of the small fears that a handful of opponents might have. But to be honest, a big part of the reason that we were able to do that, I believe, is because the council has really worked to have a collaborative culture where we're able to, we might disagree on this issue, but when it gets to the next issue, we're gonna be able to work together and to share credit and to be able to collaborate even if we disagreed on the last item. And that I think is something I'm really proud of. I think that's something that the voters of Somerville deserve. But let me be very clear that the reason politicians in Somerville cannot be opposed to affordable housing initiatives is because of all of you, because of the members of the public and the organizers that keep this as the #1 issue to make sure there is no political future for people who do not support affordable housing.
Okay, and last candidate for this question in Ward 4 will be Jesse.
Sorry about that. Thank you. So I'm going to take this question very specifically around when it asks, what can we do to help folks with displacement due to development? I'm assuming that means specifically around development projects. And so with that, I would like to explore a sort of like a return clause, if you will, like, if a building is occupied, and it's not condos, but it's occupied as rentals, a building or a house, we write into law, or at least, it might, again, we'd have to explore this because it may require state approval, but that those persons would have the option to at least come back and live in those rental units, perhaps at the same rate or an affordable rate that we deem, at that time. Because I mean, if you're just talking about development and how like development changes the city and how, yes, we have a 20% affordability on the books, and we should push for 25, I think, I believe. And but beyond that, I think beyond building our own affordable housing, we need to either push for a higher percentage, and then also, I mean, the bottom line is like the way I look at it, the way I I grew up in the city, where the wealthy want to live, the wealthy will live, and to the hell for the rest of us. So basically, we're at the mercy of those with the money, and so we need to put in place our own fail safes.
Okay, thank you. I will pass it to Akita for question #4.
Hello again. My name is Akita and I'll ask the final question. Affordable housing funding is critical, but limited. Subsidies often build homes that are still too expensive for the people struggling the most. With 1-bedroom rent over $1,500 per month. If elected to office, what policies would you focus on to ensure safe and affordable housing for all, especially the lowest income residents of Somerville, those who are living at or below 30% of the area median income.
Thanks, Akita. And for this final question, we'll go back to our original order. So we'll start with Steph in Ward 2.
Thank you so much, Kenya. I appreciate you with that question. We definitely have a very important role in our community. Am I good? I was waiting for the timer to come on. I thought it was going to come on as I was talking. And that we definitely can step up and making our community better. Definitely accommodating for our 66% of renters in the city, I think is vital. I think building and supplying our community with as much housing as possible at all income levels, I think is something that we should be looking at. But we also should be looking at opening up programs to get our renters who are working in that area the better assistance that they can get. We are lacking in getting services to a lot of renters. I think that we should be doing better with that. Definitely the Office of Housing Stability could use some more funding to help out more renters. And I think that just finding out, helping individuals find better work, I think will help them be able to afford the increasing rents that we have going on in the city. Thank you.
Okay, and also from Ward 2, we have JT.
Great, thank you. I love this question because it recognizes that even though our programs like inclusionary zoning, affordable housing overlay, they're incredible. They help a lot of people who are rent burdened, but they frequently do miss the needs of the lowest income residents of Somerville. You know, it's been hard to even place a Section 8 voucher in Somerville, partially because folks are concerned about the inspections. So that mandatory inspection program can definitely overcome that as our payment standards and voucher availability starts increasing. But to really address the needs of our lowest income renters, we have to build public housing locally. We have to do it, and it can't be SHA. The federal government won't allow them to build anymore. So that's why I've been spending the summer working with partners in organized labor who have proven success in other communities building mixed income, multi-generational, family-oriented public housing projects in the Boston region. I'm exploring the strategies for securing both the land and the funding, right? Which comes partially from our American Rescue Plan Act funding, partially from the GLX reimbursements, partially from private investments from union pension funds who are seeking stable returns. We can create hundreds of new affordable community-owned housing units in the city, public housing units, and we can build it with Somerville residents earning a truly living wage, trained in the trades, and keeping our tax dollars here at home. That's the kind of powerful transformative change that we need to be putting near these GLX stations and actually addressing the needs of our lowest income, most at-need communities, including the elderly and disabled. So that's what I want to see in the next year.
Okay, in Ward 3, we have Ben.
I completely agree with the desperate need to build much more housing that is available to people who make between 0 and 30% of the area median income. Let me be clear. The reason that this is so challenging to do is because it costs more money. There is unfortunately a zero sum of how much money goes into a unit and how much has to be charged for rent. And so the city developers, our partners, often find themselves in a situation where they say, well, we can build more units that are at something like 80 to 100% of the area median income. Then we could, maybe build a single unit that would be available for the same cost. So you can't kind of weasel your way out of that basic fact. We need to spend more money to create these units. And we need to take, as Councillor Scott just mentioned, we need to take every possible way to get that funding. So to me, one of the most straightforward ways to do it, the city does not own a lot of land, but we do own certain very important pieces of land right next to new train stations that is very valuable. And that is land that we get to say what happens there. We can, so the fact that we own it, that is already a major financial leverage point that we can use to much increase the number of affordable units that are truly deeply affordable. And I would also say the amount of developer contributions that are coming through linkage fees are going to expand exponentially over the next couple of years. And we need to double down now that a priority is not just to maximize the number at 110% of area median income, but also to create units available to people struggling the most.
Okay, before we move on, it looks like it looks like our dear blue sky timer might have timed out on us. So this is a piece of Zoom technology we have been experimenting with, and it was good while it lasted. So thanks for everyone's cooperation. Sam is going to transition to using her phone in her Zoom screen, which she did a really great job of Sunday night. So appreciate everyone's patience with this. So Sam, let us know when you're ready.
Okay.
And then the next candidate will be Jesse in Ward 4, and you'll be able to see the timer on Sam's screen.
Okay.
Okay, Jesse, okay, for everybody, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna press start once you start talking, and then I'll hold it up, okay?
Okay. So, okay, definitely the goal would be to get everybody working at wages at which a union wage, a livable wage, and hopefully be able to access housing through those other mechanisms. But to my colleagues' points, you're absolutely right. We need more public housing that goes from 0 to 30. Basically, at most takes 30% of an individual's income that they're currently making. Otherwise, would and believe me, I am absolutely advocating for workforce development, workforce housing, and everything in between. But if we really want to have the full spectrum,
it's very important that we leverage any resources that we can to build that type of housing where we can, if somebody loses their job, they know that they are not going to the rent will decrease to whatever their income is. There's that, and then also, folks being able to. Oh man, this is tough. I lost my train of thought a little bit, but. And also my phone might die, so I'm gonna probably have to plug in, but I got 15 seconds. And with that said, always increase wages is the most important thing, get people working, but we definitely need to diversify our housing stock so that we have all incomes living in the city. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much. The timer is ready. From Ward 5, we'll have Tessa.
Okay. This is incredibly important because we need to make sure that we have housing available for all residents in our city, regardless of their income. That's what it is to be an inclusive community. And we've been relying on public-private partnerships and developers to address housing needs for decades, and it's just not working. This strategy does not meet the needs in our community. And so we have to build public housing here in Somerville. Social housing, mixed use housing, mixed income housing. Somerville is thriving financially, and we can choose to do this. When we don't, that is a moral choice because budgets are moral documents. We have a lot of tools at our disposal to directly invest in more affordable housing. Some that have already been mentioned tonight is money coming back from GLX, the COVID relief money that we're getting, money from pilot, transfer fees, linkage fees. We have unprecedented commercial tax-based revenue that we can use. We can do this if we choose to. And so we need to do it. We need to expand the 100 Homes program, buy land, put it in the community land trust, build our own deeply affordable social housing. We cannot be waiting for the state or government to take action because this is an urgent need for people who are living in our community. And we need to, City Council really needs to be the ones to take action on that. And we need to do that while also supporting workers so that wages can rise. We need to make sure we are building with prevailing wage. We need to fight for a Green New Deal for Somerville. We need to enforce the wage theft ordinance so fewer people are living in poverty in our city. And when we do these two approaches in tandem, we can make a real substantive material difference for people who are living in our community.
Okay, next from Ward 5, we'll have Todd once the timer's ready.
So I've heard a lot of great ideas on how we should go about creating more affordable housing. I believe that the commercial development that goes on in the city, either for businesses or housing in general, in the past, developers have made modifications to the developments that they're working on, and in the deals that they made with the city, there were lump sum payments. I believe that we should look into implementing a % annual fee that is attached to future developments that then can bring in money year over year to help benefit affordable housing. We'd have a constant flow of money coming in if we're able to do something like that. We should look at everything that everybody's talked about tonight and see how we can implement them and come up with a way that we have lots of different avenues to be able to increase the money coming in to develop more affordable housing. So through conversations within our community and outside the community, we should be able to come up with a good solution.
Okay, and next in Ward 5, we have Beatrice.
So I witnessed this firsthand when I was working on affordable housing. I was in Cambridge where they have a very robust funding. CPA funds have been going in there for over a decade before Somerville ever started. And even then, when someone called me when they needed 30% or below median housing, I had to hang up the phone on them. Yeah, I said, you need public housing or you need Section 8. So I'm glad this question comes up because it's dear to my heart. And we have a lot of people working at minimum wage who need this type of housing. I don't disagree we need to improve our wages at all. But I think there's a couple of steps we can look at. First, we need to look at increasing our CPA funds. We started at the middle of this decade is when we started our CPA funds. We're 10, 15 years behind, and we're at 1.5%. Cambridge is at 3%. We also need to look at our linkage fees. They're lower than Boston and Cambridge. Cambridge is at $20 a square foot, and Boston is at 13. We're at 10. We need to be very aggressive about development and looking. When I worked in affordable housing, I looked at every property out there that could potentially be potential for development. We can't wait. We have to anything. I became an expert on developing brownfield sites. I can tell you that. And then I just want to bring everybody to his perspective. $30 million at the cost of about $600,000 a unit, which is what we think is the going rate, builds us 50 units of housing. There's funding out there, but it's just not enough. And we need to work with our state and federal representatives to stop the idea that housing is a temporary condition and it's just not sustainable. The solution to affordable housing is to move to New Hampshire. That's not sustainable. Sorry.
Okay, next in Ward 7, we have Alex.
Thank you. So for me, affordable housing actually gets to supply. So maybe to bring some excitement into the forum, I actually disagree with what JT Scott said earlier. I do think that increasing supply across the entire city is a pathway to more affordability. And so how do we get the increase in supply that we want that actually has affordable houses that are available for people on living in very low incomes? And I think what most of the candidates have said so far is that the city needs to support that effort, needs to be in the driver's seat from a financing perspective and even from a building perspective. And so I greatly support huge expansions of new buildings by all of our public transit stations, not just the Green Line extensions, but also the existing transit lines throughout the entire city. We need to also have I think a serious conversation about what we permit in terms of existing housing stock of our 2- and 3-family homes around the community, how we can permit a rebuild and expansion of those units into more units as long as they guarantee in perpetuity affordability within the new building. I think the way we go about funding this is to actually create a new fund, starting with a seed from the GLX funding that's coming back to the city of $30 to $50 million, but perpetually fund that, that bucket of money by thinking of new sources of revenues that get at the types of things we want in our to improve in our community. So I'm thinking about long-term increases in terms of parking permits, in terms of taxes and fees collected on developments that don't include affordable housing. Think about progressive taxation and fee collection on the types of housing that is crowding out and pricing people out of our community in order to fund a bucket of money that can provide financing that can beat the bank for developers or families that want to invest in real affordability long-term.
Next in Ward 7, we have Becca.
Yeah, so I don't want to repeat what other folks have already said, but I think we really need to use the funding that the city has available to it with regards to the Green Line extension, the American Rescue Plan Act money, the linkage fees that we have, and exploring increasing those, fighting for the real estate transfer fee in coalition with other cities, which I know some folks on this call have been working on, and supporting the Somerville Community Land Trust with funding to purchase land and make the housing on it deeply affordable for the long term. I definitely, with what other folks have already said, that we need to build deeply affordable. I would also add net zero or passive house standard public housing to target those at 0 to 30% of area median income, especially service workers, immigrants, the elderly, folks that are disabled, to really like target those folks, because the market's not building for them. The market is building luxury units, and that is what the dollar commands. So we need to, that is our responsibility as the city to take that on, especially around transit where the city owns land, and to aggressively go after land where the city could purchase and build housing. Obviously I support, enforcing and expanding the wage theft ordinance using prevailing wage agreements to build new development and create a Somerville Green New Deal. And I think we need to work hand in hand on both of these issues to create a city that actually works for those at the lowest area median income. Thank you.
And the last candidate we have for this question is Judy in 7.
Nicole, closing us out, finish strong. So first, I think we need to agree as a city that housing is a fundamental human right, that's one of our values that leads us in this conversation. It's disheartening to know that 41% of renters and 39% of homeowners, so 40% of both categories, are cost burdened, which means they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And in fact, nearly 20% of renters pay more than 50% of their income in housing. This should not be folks' reality in the city of Somerville. I believe we should increase density around our new Green Line stations so that folks have easy access to public transportation, and we should build higher around them. I also want to propose that we look at and explore accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, or in-law apartments that Boston's starting to explore, to increase availability and supply of additional rental options, and require those to be, a percentage of those to be affordable. I also believe, like many on this forum, we should invest in our community land trust and deeply invest in our 100 Homes program so that we create permanently affordable housing opportunities and preserve our existing housing. I also want to make sure we think about this through a lens of access. And so I've heard from folks that accessing our inclusionary housing opportunities is sometimes really difficult for those whose English is not their first language, or don't have access to a computer and fall within our digital divide. And so making sure management companies offer translated documents, offer language capacity for recertification, so that being able to get into an inclusionary unit isn't inaccessible for so many of our folks in Somerville. So these are just some of the crucial steps I'll take, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
All right, thank you. Before I pass it back to Akita to introduce Matt in our next section, I just want to ask all candidates to come on camera, if possible, for this last section. And then Sam, would you like me to take over the timekeeping, or would you like to do this section as well?
I'm happy to do it.
Okay, great. Akita, it's on to you.
Thank you, candidates. We will now take the last several minutes of the forum to do lightning round questions. I am now passing it to Matt.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matt. I am a Ward 4 resident and a member of the Somerville Renters Committee. For the final section called the lightning round, we will ask candidates a new question every 20 seconds. After I say the question for the first time, the timer will begin. I will then repeat the question. Candidates will need to respond at the same time with a yes or no answer using the signs provided. Yes signs are green and no signs are red. We have 10 questions for this round. Sam is in the blue sky timer ready.
Yes.
Okay, let's begin. Question number 1. The Massachusetts state of emergency ended in June 15th, and the Somerville Board of Health decided to extend our local eviction moratorium for 90 days. So until September 15th, do you support a 12-month extension on the moratorium from the end of the state of the emergency, which would be until June 2022? Okay, question number 2. Do you support making Somerville fair housing law stronger by removing barriers to housing specificality, both criminal records and bad credit? Okay, question number 3. Do you support eviction records sealing protection for tenants so that evictions from the past do not become a barrier to housing in the present? Okay, question number 4. Do you support stronger oversight of the Inspectional Service Department, ISD, to improve the enforcement of housing, health, and safety code? Okay, question number 5. Do you support municipal tools for rent control? Okay, question number 6. Do you support stronger oversight of the industrial housing program to make the application process and communication for residents in these units more accessible? Okay, question number 7. Do you support requiring all developers to enter into community benefits agreement, CBA, so that the community needs are central to the developer's process? Question number 8. Do you support municipal ownership of affordable housing, not necessarily all such housing, but some portions of the city's housing stock. Question number 9, do you support guaranteeing the right to counsel so that all tenants have the legal representation in court eviction proceedings? Last question. Do you support allocating of federal COVID relief funds to cancel all the following types of debt in Somerville: rent, mortgage, and utility? This concludes our lightning round. Thank you, candidates, for all your response tonight. I am passing it to Fabiano to close our forum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Fabiano. I'm a community organizer at CAAS. On behalf of the Somerville Renters Committee and CAAS, we are sincerely grateful for everyone's time and attention tonight. Thank you to the 11 candidates running for Ward City Council in Somerville for participating in our forum to share your vision and policy proposals for housing in our city. We especially want to thank the Somerville Renters Committee, who are volunteer leaders from our community, for your months of hard work on the series of candidates forums on housing. If any Somerville resident, especially renters, would like to learn more about the CAAS community organizing program and join our movement of families and neighbors to create a better Somerville for everyone, please reach out to us. We can also connect you to our older anti-poverty program at CAAS for housing, stability, and early childhood education. Our website is caasomerville.org, and our phone number is 617-623-7370. Finally, as for next steps, we will email everyone a link to this forum recording later this week, and links to the housing questionnaires submitted by these candidates. We also encourage candidates to share their contact information with the public in case anyone has questions we did not cover tonight. The Somerville Renters Committee has one more forum for at-large city council candidates next Monday, August 16. Like tonight, this forum is not open to the public, but we will aim to live stream on Facebook again, and we will email the video recordings once they are ready. Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Good night, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you.